Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me thank several of you who have appeared before our Housing Subcommittee and given a lot of great insights, and I appreciate it, as do the members. You know, I have, and as the subcommittee chair, been listening to a lot of our colleagues, and there seems to be a pretty strong universe of those for the refinancing camp. And, you know, I fully appreciate the question of the conservators' challenge in conserving and preserving assets. The question is whether you do that for foreclosure or refinancing to a large degree. Because it's, you know, very well, if it's a default option, it's going to be one of those two. And so I don't get it when you could create a large base of continuing responsible borrowers at the end of the day, and therefore solidify a significant part of the housing market and have an economic stimulus, because if I've been patching the roof because I can't afford to you know, get a new one, and now my mortgage rate is down and I have some extra money, I'm going to go ahead and get the new roof, and that means that there's going to be a stimulus in the economy as well as a foundation for the housing base. So that makes me wonder then, and I'd like to ask you, Dr. Mayor, when I hear about Freddie Mac having investments, some call it bets, against the homeowners that are contrary to the interests of homeowners, is that one of our challenges here? Because I don't think people make investments to then go against their investments.
Right. I do agree that this is a very serious concern. In my written testimony, I go through in fairly good detail, particularly in the conclusion, how it is that ended up in a situation where well-meaning people ended up doing things that present an enormous appearance of a significant conflict of interest and a bet against homeowners. And I think you don't have to have, you could believe, as I think was reported in that story, that paying $2.5 million salaries to the people who created those instruments might well have been involved in the process. And I know many members of Congress have been very critical of the salaries paid to some of the executives in those organizations. But I think the conflict of interest of an organization who controls an outcome and also holds securities that are dependent on that control make it very, very difficult to manage the portfolio. Because if you try and sell those bonds, people in the market look and say, but I don't want to buy them because the only reason you're selling them is you're about to refinance them 10 minutes later. And history says that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, particularly Freddie Mac, actually did that.
So do you think these investments that influence Freddie's policies that may very well have discouraged homeowners with high interest mortgages from refinancing?
Yes, I think they have to. And I go through the logic in my written report. I would not follow the conservators' argument that this is $5 billion in a $600 billion portfolio, so who cares? This can't really have driven anything. I think that argument isn't right because, one, these are derivatives, so they're based on probably $26 to $30 billion of mortgages, not $5. You never value derivatives based on the value of the derivative. You value it based on the value of the underlying. But the second is that almost surely many of the other mortgages in their portfolio MBS look exactly like these. And so without disclosure of what the whole portfolio looks like, I really think we can't conclude that conflict of interest is.
Do we know if Fannie or Freddie have other investments or financing arrangements that are contrary to the interests of homeowners?
I think the mortgage-linked amortization notes that I talked about earlier give Freddie Mac the same economic interest, which is they finance over a 10-year period holdings of high interest rate mortgages, leaving them with a strip or a spread, which is 3.96%, that lasts only as long as the refinancing doesn't occur or default doesn't occur.
Well, this is a real concern to me because I don't understand why you make a bet that you can largely control the outcome of and want your bet to lose. I think that's against human nature. So I'm not quite sure these firewalls exist in a way that aren't affecting policies, and that's a problem. Let me ask any one of you, do you think the $25 billion state federal foreclosure settlement is a good deal? Do you think that that's the right amount? There's a lot of angst out there in the country that says $25 billion fell short of the mark.
Well, I don't know what's appropriate in the context of the misdeeds that were done. I do think $25 billion is substantive and can make a difference in terms of responding to the housing crisis. I think if 15, 20 billion go to modifications and some additional refinancing, I think that is substantive, particularly if it's executed over the next 12 to 18 months. So is 25 billion the right number? I don't know, but it is a substantive number.
Any of you have a view on it?
I would just say we should expect a modest impact to help some people. The biggest value is removing the uncertainty and having the housing market move forward and origination restart.
One last question. We've talked a lot about refinancing. I've been pursuing and introducing legislation today that creates a pilot program at the FHA and the FHFA that would reduce principal write-downs to 95% loan to value in exchange for the bank or the investor getting a share of the profits when the home is sold or refinanced down the line, so generally known as shared appreciation mortgages. I think it takes away some of the concerns that Senator Corker was talking about. It's not a complete, question that we raise very often here about the moral line. You are getting a write-down, but you're also giving up the possibility of appreciation in return for the write-down. What do you think of that as a concept?
I think that's an excellent idea. I wish I had thought of that in my response to Senator Corker, but I do think that that is appropriate, that there should be shared appreciation of any principal write-down, and perhaps clawback provisions too, if homeowners don't execute in the way that they're contracted to do in the principal reduction modification. So I think that's, I think there's a lot of moving parts here, and I'm sure this may not work out as you would hope for because there's just so many things going on. But I think it's given that we've got this issue for the next 3, 5, 7 years, I think this is entirely appropriate to do. Hopefully, we learn from this, and this will become part of the toolkit going forward.
Mm-hmm. I would support the idea of trying to look for ways that, as you've pointed out, the private sector are already managing these mortgages, and we know some of them are using shared appreciation mortgages. And I think in legislation, as I noted in the written comments, we should actively call for such pilot programs modeled off of private sector initiatives. The other thing I would sort of just point to in that process is one thing that might help in this legislation would be taxpayers could, in fact, have a clawback over a longer period of time, which is to say homeowners could promise a share of not only the appreciation of the existing home, but future homes to help pay for that. That could be done through existing tax code, which has a deferral of certain capital gains on homes, and would be a way of making such a proposal even more profitable for or break even for taxpayers as well.
I would just say that the shared appreciation mortgage might be useful for some people. Again, I'd worry about a limited impact. People just don't like to share their home with the bank or the taxpayer. We have some experience with the so-called Hope for Homeowners program that was in the 2008 legislation, and there are more people in this room than were helped by that program. Mm-hmm. So it was just a limited impact.
I appreciate it. Aquin is doing this as one servicer who's doing this pretty successfully, and we think it can be, as referred to, a tool within a large toolkit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.